Um, I'm going to talk about, excuse me, about drinking coffee when you travel. We'll try to branch this, maybe some other things depending on time. Two hot comments before I really start. And one is that I'm not a coffee drinker. So that might make you biased as to what I think. Because I'm not a coffee drinker. Other people, by them, it's much more important, that's one thing. Second thing is that I'll say what I have to say, but I'm hoping that the other one can say things back also. I don't want to talk, Mama should use other last breaths until the kind of sense, So people, if you have something to say, please feel free to talk up. Okay, so before we get into I'm going to talk to Eric in three parts. My first part is something that's not what you usually think about when you think about drinking coffee on the road, and that is the Gemara says, Mishnah says, there's an isser to drink shecher with a goy. There's an isser to drink certain beverages with a goy. It's a machlokes. We're showing them exactly which beverages are included in that thing. The point that some Rishonim hold it's even things that are not even alcoholic. Even the example is it's a certain honey beverages that are maybe even included also. You're not allowed to drink them in the guy's location. You can't drink it with them. And the reason is because of Kashrus, because when you drink together with them, it brings a certain warmth and closeness. Okay, think of it when you think of sheikha, you think of drinking in a bar. So people don't drink in a bar just because they're thirsty. They drink in a bar because that's where they hang out with people and they get together with each other. So it leads to Kashrus. It's one of the things that you're not allowed to do because of Kashrus, among other isurim. And some Rishonim hold that it goes not just for sheikha, it goes for many other things, including things that are non-alcoholic. Okay, in that din, the Mechaber Paskin, it goes for all kinds of beverages. It's a question if non-alcoholic also, but all kinds of beverages. But the Ramah is Mekel. That's probably why most people not familiar with this din. Ramah is Mekel. It says it only goes to a very, very specific kind, shecher tamarim. Okay, something date beer. Okay, something unusual that we wouldn't have. So for us, that's why most people never even heard of such a din. Because if you're Ashkenazi, you never even heard of such a thing because it's relevant to such a very unusual case that most of us don't. It never happens. Whoever drinks date beer, go into a bar and drink date beer, go into a guy's house and drink date beer. Okay, so it's true that din doesn't apply so much the ikra din, but the Chayadim says, the Chachmas says, he says, Chazal made this issur because they thought that hanging out with the goyim, spending too much time drinking with them would lead to problems, lead to chasnas. You get too friendly with the wrong kind of people. So the Chacham says, he says, in our days, he says, this is not technically the issur. The issur doesn't apply to us. But in our days, when they have coffee shops and hot chocolate shops, that was, I guess, the rage then. People drink hot chocolate and coffee shops. He says, and we've seen all kinds of tzaras that came about because people went to these places and drank there. So it's not the technicality of what Chazal asked. Chazal specifically asked a very specific thing, and we paskin only for shecher tomorrow, a very unusual thing. He says, but we could be smart enough to realize that we should avoid those kind of things also. Okay, so that is it's not the ikra din. He's just saying we should be just as smart as Chazal were to avoid these things. And nowadays, our Starbucks is our example of that. Okay, our Starbucks is his coffee shop or his hot chocolate shop, where people sit around and they hang out with each other. They schmooze and they sit down. They don't just get a coffee and walk out the door. They sit around and they talk with each other. And a person has to be careful in those kind of settings to be avoiding those takalos concerns that would lead to chasnas. Okay, so now let's talk about the thing that you probably thought I was going to talk about. Okay, which was about the shadows of whether it's kosher or treif. So. The coffee itself, if you take just coffee beans and water, it's kosher. But there's nothing wrong with it. They probably know there were shilos in Achronim about maybe it should be pishlakum. Okay, we don't worry about those kind of things, and we say, it's fine. The coffee is kosher. So what's the problem? The problem is that we'll use Starbucks as our example. We'll see other places similar ideas. They realize that people don't just want to drink coffee, and they start serving all kinds of other things also. Okay, and when they started serving many other things, that eventually branched into things that were a little bit sensitive. We didn't know if they were kosher, like some lemonades and smoothies and frappuccinos. These other things that have ingredients in them that are fancier or more sophisticated than just coffee. And because they have those ingredients in them, so you can't drink those things themselves unless they had a hashgacha on them. Okay, so you have to know every single one. Does it have hashgacha? Does it not have hashgacha? The ingredients, some of them have ingredients that are a little questionable whether they're kosher or they're not kosher. But what got more serious is that they then started serving sandwiches that had meat or cheese or other things that were absolutely treif. Without a question, they were treif. Okay, now that's in Starbucks, but similar things. If you walk into a 7-Eleven, they also don't serve just coffee and chmeis and slurpees. They also serve. They have hot dogs cooking there. They also have hot food there. Okay, so all of a sudden we have something in front of us that's not just maybe it's kosher, maybe it's not kosher. But we know it absolutely is treif. You know, a corned beef sandwich is in the store like this. Of course, it's treif. Okay, so the question is, does that affect us? Does the fact that there's this treif thing there, the thing that's absolutely treif, does that mean that somehow that my coffee, because that became not kosher, somehow does that thing transfer somehow to my coffee? Okay, and in each store, that child is bigger or smaller depending on what you're looking at. What I mean is, some of the Starbucks stores don't serve those kind of sandwiches. Some places you go to a rest stop and all they're serving is coffee. They aren't serving any treif sandwiches. Some of them, it's like these bigger Starbucks that they're serving big treif, very seriously treif sandwiches. Okay, so we have to think if there's a range of places. So when as we think this through, I'm going to take certain halachas. Okay, you don't have to agree to them, and many people don't agree to them. You don't have to agree to them, but they're going to be halachas to helping us understand this. And the first is like this: I'm going to assume that things that are made on cholastam kalim, even if I personally eat chol v'yisrael, I'm not going to be makbid on things that are made on cholastam kalim. I would treat them as milchigs, of course, because they're milchigs, but I'm not going to worry about the kalim that those things are made on. Okay, I'll treat it as if not to worry about those kalim. Okay, that would potentially allow me certain kulas because a lot of the things that we're talking about are milchigs, right? A lot of the things that are going to be here are going to be milk related. Many people don't agree to that, but that's what with that kind of a hanacha. Again, even if you won't agree with me on these pratim that I'm giving you, you'll hopefully agree to my conclusions at the end of the day.
It's milchigs that we can't eat with flakes or we can't eat after flakes.
We're going to get to that, but I'm saying, but if you think that cholastam is isser, then it's not a matter of is it milchigs or flakes, then it's a matter of it's treif. Okay, then it says treif as the sandwich was. Well, something like, it says it's a cheese as the cheese was. The cheese is gvin sakim. But if you think that cholastam, I'm only do it as a chumrah, but I would treat it be'etzem as treat it as a heter, then it's different. Then it's milchigs, of course, but it's not as bad. Okay, and the second thing is, this is a little more of a complicated thing, is that something that, if the only thing that's in there that I don't know about its hashgacha is the flavor, so then I won't eat it without hashgacha, but I won't worry about the kalim of it. What I mean is that if the same pot is used for regular coffee and is used for flavored coffee, and the coffee is kosher, I just don't know if the flavor is kosher. So I won't drink the one with the flavor unless it has hashgacha. But I won't worry, that won't affect the kalim. Okay?
Well, why would that not affect the kalim?
So I'm not going to really explain. I'll say it to you quickly if you want to. You have to believe me, but I'll tell it to you quickly. I'll say it quickly, and if you understand or if not, it's okay. We'll talk about it afterwards. Maybe not after I want to take a drink, but after, later, a different time to look at that. And that is, a flavor that's in something is always at small percentages that are bottle. The etzim would be bottle b'shishim. Why are they not bottle b'shishim? Because they're avidah l'taima. Okay, well, the din is of something that's avidah l'taima is only not bottle if it's inherently treif. Something that's only treif because it has beliyas of treif doesn't make a difference in avidah l'taima. It's called a melech habulu midam. Okay, it doesn't make a difference. Okay, now the chemistry of treif, things that are used in flavors is that the things that are treif about flavors, almost in every case, not in every case, but in almost every case, is things that are inherently kosher but are made on treif kalim. It has to do with carbon chains. They tend to be in the vegetable ones, the ones that taste good, as opposed to the animal ones that don't taste good. They don't have that flavor. So the treif that's in there is only a melech hablu midam, so I wouldn't want to eat it. And there's potentials for Yisurim on other things like that also. But the really serious Yisurim are only going to be because of melech hablu midam. Okay, so it's not going to affect the kalim from the next thing. Okay. Okay. Then now also I'm going to talk to you about now some din. What should I worry about? We're trying to figure out does the treif sandwich that's there affect my coffee, or does the hot dogs in the 7-Eleven affect my coffee? I'm going to talk to you about it from a perspective of din. Okay, is it mutter or is it asr? But you should know that, as you all know, I work for the CRC. From ties on, I'm working for the CRC, and the Short said to us in his time. He said to us, he said, you should know. We can find the reason in din to be matter a lot of things, as you can hear in a minute, why we should be matter things. He says, but as a hashkacha, when people ask us if something is mutter asr, they don't want to hear from cheshboinus, okay? If it takes David 5 minutes to explain something, they don't want to hear that, okay? They want to hear things that are just glot, and it's just the way it's straight without any question to it. So if people will ask us about whether something's mutter asr, we shouldn't tell them things are mutter when it takes a whole cheshbon to explain to them why it's mutter. Okay? We should be telling them straightforward. If it's mutter means it's going to be, has to be clear and simple why it's mutter. Okay, and while we were dealing with that here at the CRC, the OU was dealing with the same kind of questions about telling people, and Rebelsky told them the same thing. He said to them, don't tell people things that are mutter when it takes a whole cheshbon for why it should be mutter, and you'll hear all kinds of details deep in the Hilchas Taruvas. Okay, he says that don't tell them those kind of things. So if you want to come from that perspective, you want to see that I have something without a shayla at all, so go buy a bottle of Pepsi. You buy a bottle of Pepsi, it has hashkacha on it, and you know you're safe and you're good. Maybe we can think of a shayla for that also. But you say, no shayla, I'll find something without any shayla at all, and I'll be safe. But if you want to say, but I wonder what the din is, or it's 2:30 in the morning and I'm on the road and I need a coffee. This is like not going to work. Don't tell me, don't be such a chacham. Now I need my coffee. So then then maybe it's different. Okay. So what's the one of the rules about deciding about tam? But tam, again, I'm not eating the sandwich, I'm eating the coffee, is that we differentiate between a kli rishon and a kli sheni and an irud kli rishon. What does that mean? A kli rishon is the pot that or the kli that the food was cooked in, the kli that was on the fire, that's a kli rishon. In a kli rishon, tam transfers completely. A whole step down from that is a kli sheni. If we take something out of that original pot, we put it into another pot, we pour coffee into a cup. Okay, the coffee that's in the cup is a klisheni. L'chatchila, we're makbid on blias in there, but the evet, there's no blias in the klisheni. In a klisheni, no tam transfers in a klisheni. Okay, and then there's an in-between case. The in-between case is where if it's irim klirishon, which is not that it's in the klirishon with a real tam, it's pouring from the klirishon into a klisheni. So it's in between. It's in between a klirishon and a klisheni. So then we say tam transfers kadei klipo. A very small amount transfers, but not so much. Okay, so in the kli rishon we have complete tam transfer. In the kli sheni, b'diavad there's no tam transfers, and irur is in between. Tam transfers, they keep a small amount, but not too much. There's one exception to that rule I just told you, and that is, I'm talking to you about pouring liquids. Okay, what happens if I have a solid food, a sandwich? Okay, we call it a davar gush, a solid food like a sandwich. Then there's a machlokes in the achronim whether maybe even when that's out of a kli rishon it has the din of a kli rishon. Okay, maybe even when I take the sandwich and I put onto a plate, it has the din of a kli rishon even when it's out of a kli rishon. Okay, so.
Sorry, you don't want this bread on both sides of the meat, right?
In this bread, the time will go through the bread.
If Mr. Starbucks puts a tray of sandwich on a plate in the Starbucks, so the plate really only has cold bread on it, right? The flesh is in the middle of the two cold pieces of bread. Does that minimize the issue a little bit?
I don't know if that's accurate.
I never ate meat in Starbucks.
Right. My impression is, I might be wrong. My impression is that the whole sandwich gets heated up, and it's not just the corned beef gets heated up. But everything goes together, and the bread is cold also. It's hot also.
Really?
But you would say you're right. If the bread doesn't get, if we take the hot dog at, let's say, in 7-Eleven, well, the hot dog is the only thing that's hot. Right? Into a bun. So then I'm saying, what do you say? Excuse me?
Corn dog would be a good example.
A corn dog where the whole thing is heated up. Okay, I think then that's what they do here, Joseph. Okay. So the davar gush is not our most important thing. The obvious thing is that they make these sandwiches are hot sandwiches, okay? Or in our 7-Eleven where they have the hot dogs over there. So that's in a kli rishon. And there's a bli over there that there's for sure the things that are in the oven are for sure treif as completely treif. Okay, that's one thing that's a kli rishon. Okay, is there any other kli rishon in Starbucks? Okay, or in a coffee shop? Is there any place else that there's a kli rishon? Well, there's a kli rishon is the inside of the coffee pot, right? Someplace they're cooking up coffee, right? Someplace in there they're cooking up the coffee. Okay, and then some of them have other fancier kalim that are used for steaming up drinks. Okay, you take milk and you steam up the milk. Now you have this frothy, steamed up beverage. Okay, so that the thing that heats that up, it's a nozzle that shoots out steam. That's a cleavation also. That's like as if a piece of fire. That's also a cleavation. Okay, so there's another place where we could have Tom can transfer completely. What?
Dishwasher.
A dishwasher. So a dishwasher and the sink. The sink we'll do in a second. Dishwasher is not a cleavation. Okay, dishwasher is not a cleavation because I shouldn't say that. The dishwasher has a part of it that's a cleavation. On the bottom of the dishwasher, where the water gets heated up, that's a cleavation. Okay, but the rest of the dishwasher is not a cleavation. The water just spritzes from that cleavation onto the dishes. And I have something else to tell you. In the stores, they don't wash dishes in a dishwasher. Okay, they wash dishes in a sink. Okay, in your house they wash dishes in a dishwasher. In these stores, what some of them do is after they wash the dishes and they're completely clean, they put them in just to be sterilized in the machine. Okay, they're not washing it there. They're putting a clean dish in there just to be sterilized to get rid of all the germs in it. Okay, but it's not being washed in there. Nafkamina is that the sterilization just takes a few minutes. Okay, it's not even possible to be cleavation. So we have one cleavation, which is when we heat up our sandwiches. That's a cleavation. We have cleavation when we cook up the coffee. We have a cleavation when we steam it afterwards. In some places they'll steam up drinks also. Okay, those are the places we have a cleavation. Then we have some places where there's an irrit cleavation, like in the sanitizing machine. Okay, we cook up water on the bottom of it. We spritz it onto things. We in a sink. Okay, in the sink that they wash it in. That's also this irrit cleavation. Okay, a very small irrit cleavation. Think about it. There's only the water comes out of the faucet, only hits on one spot. The dish that it hits, that's the irrit cleavation. Everything else.
Do you have problems with kefir shop with other foods in there? If you leave it for 24 hours?
You could theoretically, but no, that's not lamaisa.
Why? They wash it every 24 hours.
They're washing all the time. Things are being washed because they got to come in and go out. You know I don't think things sit like that. You know that should sit to be covered.
According to our money, if you put any cold water you wash the dishes, it wouldn't be irrit. So I don't know if more people put a little cold water, you wouldn't have a problem irrit.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that cheetah, but it could be such a thing. But I'm saying is that even when we wash our dishes in the sink, the water can only hit one thing. I mean, how much can it hit? You know, the 1 or 2 plates on the top. Okay, so they can
also pour things into the sink. They can pour things into the sink also.
Pour, like, what would they pour into the sink?
The tray means no, off the fire.
Take the coffee pot.
They had a flavored coffee, which is not kosher, and they pour it into the sink. They would the clay.
Isn't the ordinance to have 3 sinks after you wash the sink?
Yes.
Right? So your first sink gets boiling hot water.
The first thing.
Stays there.
Okay, so what? So what? That's a cliche. That's a cliche. Once the water comes out of the faucet, it's in a cliche. It's only the first thing that it hits that's irrit cleavation. After it hits something and it leaves from there, we're out of here. We're finished. It's all cliche now. Yeah. Most do not. No, yes, it's such a shita that as long as it keeps on pouring, then that's considered irui. No, most don't think like that. They say if irui is what hits, what pours out, what hits, that's what hits. Now that's irui. Everything after that, we're finished. We're in the klisheni now. So there's a big bath of klisheni. So we shouldn't do that. If it was in my house, no, you can't do that. You can't put tray stuff into my sink. But how's that going to affect me? Okay, so if we're gonna look around, we're gonna see that I'm not to say that it's not possible that the kelim should become treif. It's possible. Things could become, if it's done just right. If I have an irur just so, if a piece of meat sits on my piece of my coffee machine, it sits there, poked to be irur like that, we could potentially have a problem. We could potentially have a problem. Okay, but it's hard to get to a point where we should be treif. It could be.
You have the grease from the stuff that goes into the sink, and the real grease that goes onto the coffee bottle after let's say together, then you're going onto it.
So it could happen.
Not
it could have
pieces. It's not so.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it could happen. Again, we have limited e-rules, but yeah, it could happen. I'm not saying it can't. It could happen, but we're talking about only a limit to how much could happen. Okay? There's only so much that could happen like that. Okay. So so we figured out that it is possible. It is possible. It's not so likely, but it's possible. It's possible that some of the kelim, could end up being treif maybe a klipa through irui. It's harder to get something that should be really treif, like a klirishin, but we could possibly end up with an irui, which would be a kedei klipa. But now, let's stop for a second. Okay, so we decided we have kelim that could possibly be treif, even a little bit they could be treif. Now, it's not enough that the kelim are treif. Okay, we need to get, the treif has to get into my food. Okay, so how is the treif blia that's in there going to now get over to my coffee? It's not enough that I have treif kelim. I don't care if you have treif kelim. You do whatever you want to. The problem is, does it affect my coffee? So now let's think about what it takes to, now if we make something fancy, like I told you, you use a steaming to steam up your drink, then you put it into a klirishin. If there was something treif there, you just made your drink treif. So you can't do that. But I'm talking about just the plain coffee machine. What happens in a coffee machine? Okay, what goes on? What's happening inside the coffee machine? There's a big pot in which the water is boiling. The water is boiling. That's where we start with water that's boiling. Okay, that doesn't get washed with everything else. That just sits there, and that doesn't get washed with everything else. The water comes from there, pours through the coffee to go into my cup, into the thing that holds the coffee. Okay, how did that happen?
I thought when you have a coffee machine, you mean like the ones that have a zit of What are you calling a coffee machine?
Yes. So in that, no, what you see in the shul, what you're describing is a thing that has well, we can make cups of coffee right now. Okay? I'm talking about is they brew coffee, a carafe full of coffee at a time. Okay, so what's going on? I'll describe to you what happens in the machine. There's water in the machine, and the water trickles through. It percolates through the coffee grinds and goes into a holder that holds all the coffee on the finished coffee that you're going to drink from. Okay, how does that happen?
Does it boil in that holder?
No.
So that's Kushani?
Yeah, that container that's in is just a klisheni. But what happens is like this. There's a metal frame that's part of the coffee machine, the metal frame. The frame holds on top of it a filter. The filter has on top of it coffee grinds. Okay? And then the water goes through that. The point is, the water slowly trickles through the coffee grinds in order to absorb all the taste out of the coffee. Okay, that's what it's trying to do. It's percolating through. It doesn't go quickly. It slowly trickles its way through that, and then there's a filter on the bottom, a paper on the bottom that's letting the liquid through, but not the grinds, not the actual ground up coffee. And then when it drips out the bottom, there's the coffee that someone wants to drink. So what's treif? What did we say is the thing that could be treif that's in here? Okay, this metal frame that holds up the filter. Okay, that's the part that comes out that could be washed with everything else that could become treif. Okay, so let's say it was treif. So how will Tom get from that frame into my coffee? The water that's pouring through has to pour through the grinds and through the filter. So even if water were to touch that frame, that's only klisheni. The water already had its irui hit onto the grinds, which then have to trickle through them to hit the frame. So that only would be a klisheni anyhow. The truth is, the truth is that even if almost never would hit the frame, Bachlal would hit the frame. The frame is just meant to hold up the whole structure, the filter and the liquid. Almost nothing is going to hit the frame altogether. But even if something were to hit it, then all it's hitting is as a klisheni. Let's say it was treif. We said before, maybe it could possibly could be treif. But how that end up in my coffee, and my coffee only be as a klisheni. Yes, what do you want to say?
The bottom thing is on a warmer?
The bottom thing is on the warmer?
The coffee not going into something that's on the...
That's a good question.
That's not
Okay.
the blia. The blia is going
No,
in.
there's no
It's
that
being
carrot
reformed, but it's sitting.
So he's
Only reformed afterwards. So that's-
okay. No, so he's saying if that carafe itself was treif, you're saying, then it could be looked at as klisheni, as a klirushin. Not that the blia that got out, like he said, the blia that came out wouldn't be. Right, but if the thing itself was treif, okay. It's hard to imagine that being treif. Okay, those don't get clean in the same way in a sink. Just rinse it out. Yeah, that's a easier rinse out. That I don't believe that would become treif. I'm not even sure it has warm or not. I don't know. I guess it depends on the place. I don't know. So that's where we stand on. If that's where you stand, if you're holding just the drinking the plain coffee. Again, when we get to fancier drinks that either have ingredient questions, or other ones that use other parts that they themselves are klirushin, then we have to say maybe that thing is treif and it brings blias into me. But when I'm drinking just the plain coffee, then it's harder to imagine even if the thing was treif how that should affect the drink that I'm getting. Okay. questions before I move on to other related things?
What about like glass coffee jar?
Mhm.
So then the glass, you can make because of the glass containers. If glass were there.
If you had a place where it was in a glass, and you think maybe that glass was washed someplace else.
Right.
Okay, so yes, if we really hush it that everything was washed, so let's think what happened. Let's think about that. So what would happen now? So that let's say it was treif. So it gives, and now I drip liquid into that.
It's
A Kedei Klipa. Right, so Iri Klipa or Kedei Klipa is not going to make how much is going to be. Because a Kedei Klipa, one place where Kedei Klipa came out into a whole pot full of coffee, that's not going to be treif. It's not going to make enough grain. But if that would be on a warmer, but if someone said over here, if that would be on a warmer, then we potentially have questions. Okay, then that could be.
usually it's on the wall. That's how it keeps it warm.
Then there,
On the wall.
is it warm? Okay.
If it's just a kettle, like you go to, that's not a 7-Eleven, you go to an airline, and they have just, they go around with their coffee, or just a small place just in the kettle. The more Kashrus of the kettle itself, which is on the thing, getting draped up.
So you have to look at the situation. So when you see on the airplane, when you look on the airplane, you say there's no way that we was the treif over here. Okay, there are those who believe that they take those back into the commissary back when the plane lands, and they wash them not on the plane. They take them into their big kitchen over there where they wash it together with the first class meals. Okay, I don't know if that's really true. If that's really true, then it could have become treif. Otherwise, on the plane, where was the treif that would happen to it?
Eisen said that. Years ago, Eisen said that they used to do that. They used to take with the first class meals and wash it together.
Right. I don't know if that really is a Lamaisa concern. I don't know if they wash them at all. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, there's one to be said, use the water only place.
What?
Health-wise, the one to be said, not take that water.
Okay.
Stewards is advised not to
Have a board.
You didn't mention anything about the soap and any pagimas?
I didn't.
Out of the question.
I didn't. No, it's not out of the question. It's a little complicated. Okay. But what the soap is, as someone mentioned beforehand, when you wash in a restaurant or in a coffee shop, they wash things in 3-compartment sink. So a 3-compartment sink means the first one they just, let's see if I remember correctly. The first one they just soak it. Okay. And the second one they rinse it, and the third one they sanitize it. Okay. The first one usually has soap in it. Okay. The second one does not, and the third one has a sanitizing solution to it. Okay. So there's 2 parts to the question. One is the thing that they're putting in problem? Is what they're putting in enough to make the tam be down? Okay. The ones we tasted were they tasted. That doesn't mean everyone is. It's not necessarily that it is, but the ones that I
There was a
tasted.
shmuel a few years ago, the Shellfish Pain drank some of this detergent that he said it tasted like water. Was that true?
I don't remember in the end. I asked that we should taste it. I think I ended up doing tasting. I don't remember. One of us tasted it. We did it together. Yes. Whether
They follow rules.
what?
The question is also, do they follow their own rules?
Right. Okay.
Many don't.
Okay. So that's
They
true.
don't. Who thinks they're going to use it?
Okay. And then there's another question. There's a shayla nachronim is what happens if we something had a pegima in it in one sink. Now we move it to the next sink with no soap in it. Is the blia that's in there still treif? Do I still have to worry about the blia that's in there, or do I say it was already became puzzle? Okay, that's a shayla nachronim, but that affects it. Okay. Let me talk about 2 other things quickly. And one is related to this is drinking coffee in a hotel room. Okay, you stay over in a hotel, and there's a coffee machine there. Okay, or there's a Keurig in the machine in the room, and you wonder if you could drink over there. So the way I see it is that like this. Usually those come with something that's there. They come with coffee or K-cups that are there for you to use. That's why they have them in the room. So the way I usually think of it is that if what you're looking at in front of you is all kosher, everything that's in the hashgacha, which it usually is, okay, because usually they put in very simple, straightforward stuff, like just plain coffee or coffee and decaf, plain stuff. My feeling at that point is that you could use it. Why? Because we're used to, we have a mindset that, okay, I shouldn't say that. I'm going to have to blame all the rest of you. When I travel, okay, I travel with food. Okay, because I know when I get someplace I'm not going to be able to eat because, we only eat kosher. I can't eat wherever I go, so I travel with food. So in my mind, my suitcase has clothes and food. That's what I travel with. Okay, my impression is that Goyim don't travel with food. Okay, part of the whole chaviyah of traveling is I get to eat in all these places where I go to. Okay, so when they come to the room and there's this coffee in the room, That's what they use. Okay, then they didn't come along with their own K-cups in the suitcase to stick into the machine. That's my way of looking at it. Okay, now maybe my kids would have. They didn't bring along their things with them, but I don't think that going to travel like that. And therefore, you could disagree. That's okay. But my feeling is that when they travel, whatever's in the room, so if what's in the room is kosher, you look at it, and usually it is, because again, usually it's very simple stuff. They don't want to make things too complicated for people. So then you could use it. As far as washing, what we hear is that when they come around to check your room, they rinse it off in the bathroom, maybe at most, and take it back in. And it doesn't get washed like that with the rest of everything else.
Worst case scenario, let's say if you pour through a cup of water with that Kasher, you run the ones to make a uncut hot water.
You probably. It's the harder part would be to get it clean before you kasher it. The machinery you have to get rid of the end before you kasher it. You know? But yeah, I guess you could do that. You really the rule of stam kelim in ben yermin doesn't work when you want to kasher something. Excuse me. I'm not talking about in the hotel. I'm talking about in your hotel room. I'm not talking about. Yeah. Right. Do you see? But I don't think anybody washes them. They just sit there. Okay, maybe. Okay, now the other thing is, if it's plain, yeah, that's okay. Because they have stuff on it. Okay, so now one last thing is drinking coffee if you work in an office. Okay, so if you learn in the kernel, so you know everything is kosher here, so you're good. But if you work in some kind of an office and they have a coffee machine, so people ask the same question. They're not for traveling people, just time you go to office all the time. So if they make coffee, like we've been talking about, just I should say like a Mr. Coffee, or just a simple pot of coffee, and assuming everything is there is kosher, then I would think that was okay. They can't go so wrong. But a lot of offices have fancier things. Either they have one thing they'll have is a dispensing machine. Okay? And out of this machine, you can get all kinds of drinks. Okay, you can get coffee and hot cocoa and all kinds of mixes of different kinds of things out of the same machine. Then you have to really poke around to know, are all the ingredients that are in there kosher? Everything that's in there, let's say the hot chocolate milk, is that really kosher? And if it's not, then you have to really understand how the machine works. Does everything come out of the same hose at the bottom? Often it does, or not. You have to know the workings of the machine to know whether you could drink from that. Okay? If they have a Keurig, which is very common in offices, they have a Keurig, so there I think it's a little different than when I told you about the hotels. Even though I think that the Goyim don't travel with their food in their suitcases, but I think that if someone works in office all the time, they may have their own stash of drinks, of their own K-cups, the kind that they like. So there I wouldn't be as excited to use it and say, well, all the things that are out here are kosher today, then I can therefore use it, but in the summer they always stay kosher. I'm not that good.
They have tray for soups.
Right, so they could put, even if I walk with them, I see every day, I've been here for 2 months, and every day they keep always putting out the same 10 things, and they're always kosher, but that doesn't mean that the person sitting next to me doesn't have their own, let's say a soup or a hot cocoa that they like. They for them, sitting in the office all the time, would bring something like that.
Well, the hot soup, or the soup that they're making through that would make a tray? They're using hot
Yes.
water to make the soup.
So they're not using hot water. What they do is they have a K-cup, but instead of coffee inside the K-cup, there's a soup mix.
No, I mean something that they're getting hot water from that machine.
So they get hot water from the machine. Okay, that's a little complicated. So there's a question of Zayah then. If they put the cup underneath it, if the Zayah rises up, that's treated like Iwuri. So it's not like a pill to use it. You know what I mean? The Zayah that comes out of there, if it hits a hot surface, it's like an Iwuri Kiryushin, and it makes a big clipper. So it's better not to use it.
Is that they have two kitchens, a kosher and not kosher? Every Sunday that doesn't belong to them?
I don't understand that. If you have kosher and not kosher, but
Guys go in there, but they don't, they don't, so the kids go.
they don't until there's too many people waiting online by the trash kitchen, then they go to the kosher kitchen. You know. So,
To make the coffee machine that they can use in those.
okay, I guess it depends on the situation. I'm not thrilled. You know. But when I worked at the OU, they had a microwave, and it was kosher because hey, it's the OU. I mean, everybody eats kosher here. Well, almost everybody ate kosher. Some of the people were on Shem Shabbos, and the cleaning staff surely wasn't Shem Shabbos. So there were people who didn't use it. They said, everybody here, most of the people here keep kosher, but that doesn't, here it was a kosher price, Okay.
How's it going to get in the cafe after it pours through to your cup? There's no cleaning at all.
They just pour it into your cup. I should say, I assume you're taking a disposable cup. They just pour it into your cup.
It's not a lot of machines that you take it in.
and take it out of. So that I don't think that gets washed very seriously until someone rinses that out.
Only way to have a microwave or a toaster in a place with going and not shower showers is to basically have a lock on it.
You could have a lock on it. I mean, that the only if the Yidden have
You have a
access to it.
kitchen that is a kosher microwave and a non-kosher microwave, but you're saying you can't be silent on that. So you have to put a lock on it, please. The Yidden, the shower showers have
What can I say? Well, cover your food. Use the tape and cover your food. Yeah. Okay. Beseder.